So we're going to talk about what makes Ryan Gosling different. And I mean really different. And it's not what you think. Because if you look at his career, it's really easy to explain it the wrong way. Like people say, he followed his instincts, he stayed true to himself, he didn't choose an obvious path, and that may all be true. But that's not what's actually really interesting. A lot of people follow their instincts, right? But that alone does not create a career like he's had. So the real question is, what did Ryan Gosling understand that most people miss? So he didn't just follow what felt right to him in isolation, let's say. He paid attention to how others responded when he was operating from that zone of genius, that authentic space in himself. And he wasn't calculated about it, and he wasn't performative, although he was performing, right? A lot of that. But he wasn't performative, wasn't formulaic. What he was responsive. And what I mean by that is he paid attention. He paid attention to how people reacted when he was fully himself. And he paid really close attention, like he honed that. I'm Leezá Steinorf, and I work with leaders and individuals on how they show up and how they live from that place and how they're experienced and how they can operate with clarity inside that dynamic. And one of the biggest patterns I see is that people are told to follow their inner compass, which is super important, but they're never taught how to read the response that that's creating. So they either stay focused only on their internal experience and they lose awareness of how that actually lands in the world, or they overcorrect and they shape themselves around those external expectations, especially in show business, right? But not only, also in private life. And then they lose connection to their own inner compass. But there's a third way, there's another way. And Ryan Gosling is a super clean example of that. So let's go into how people actually describe working with him, because it's interesting. This is where the pattern becomes really visible. So he had a director, Nicholas Winding Refn, who worked with him on Drive. And he said something super telling. He described Gosling as someone who understood that the character didn't need to explain himself. That actually, the less that he did, the more powerful the presence became. And that wasn't just a stylistic choice. That was awareness. Like, he could feel that silence was doing something. And now if you contrast that with Damien Chazelle, who directed him in La La Land, awesome movie, Chazelle talked about Gosling's ability to be precise without overplaying it. That's what I meant earlier about he wasn't formulaic, right? To let a moment just sit long enough for the audience to feel it without him forcing that on them. And again, that's not just instinct. It's timing, it's awareness, it's reading the room, right? And then look at Greta Gerwig in Barbie, right? And she described Gosling as someone who could go fully into the absurd, but at the same time, remain completely aware of the tone, of the feel. And it's that balance between commitment and awareness that is really super rare. Because most people, when they push a performance, they either lose control or they pull back too soon. And he doesn't. He adjusts, right? He adjusts. He dances with it. So now the question becomes, what do all three of those perspectives have in common? Different directors, different genres, completely different roles, but they're all describing the same thing. And it's not personality, and it's not his charisma, which he has in that super silky way of his, I might say. But it's calibration. A finely tuned, let's say, integration of his highest expression with an ongoing awareness of how that expression is being received and then refining it in real time. That's what I meant with the dance, right? So he's aware of what he's bringing, who he is, what his gifts are, and at the same time, he's reading how that has an impact, how it's landing in the world. And that leads to a deeper question. How does someone actually develop that, right? Because this is where it becomes useful beyond acting. So he's not just asking, does this feel right for me? Which is important, but that's a starting point, let's say. He's also asking, how's this landing with others? What's it creating in them, for them? Is it holding their attention? Is it creating like that tension? Is it drawing people in? Are they like engaged and into it? And is it landing in a way that creates the most, let's say, meaningful or resonant experience for the people that are watching it? And then he adjusts. If it doesn't, if it does, he stays with it, right? So he works with that. And it requires presence of self and of the environment. It's an energetic engagement. So let's take that same pattern and extend it beyond acting, okay? Look at Project Hail Mary. If you haven't seen it, do yourself a favor. It's awesome. But he didn't just take the role, right? He stepped in as a producer, holding that awareness of the entire experience that was being created, and not just his role within it, right? He zoomed out at the same time. And that changes everything, because now you're not just performing inside the system, you're actually contributing to shaping it, to curating it. And what does that producing reveal about how he thinks? It shows that he's not waiting for something that's going to fit to his prescribed imagination of how it should be, right? He understands what creates impact, let's say, and then he builds around it. Like he's highly attuned to what's needed, and then he responds with intention. So he's asking, what kind of story holds attention this way? That he has an expanded situational awareness. What kind of pacing keeps that interest? What kind of tone or feel can carry the story? And that's the same mastery, I'm going to say purity of his brilliance, his unique brilliance, just at a higher level. And this is where the lesson becomes really clear, because most people are trying to figure themselves out internally, which is really important. But then they stop there. Asking questions. What am I good at? What feels natural? What do I like? What direction I want to go? And that internal orientation is vital. But it's incomplete, because your strength is not just what you do, right? It's the presence that you have and what happens when you do it, when you show up that way. How your presence and expression actively, I'm going to say, shape what is unfolding around you. And you're a co-creator of that. So a more accurate question is, what consistently changes in the room when you show up this way? Right? There's a response to you when you're at your highest and best. Like, do people lean in? Do they listen differently? Maybe trust you more? Maybe they engage more intensely? And that's the signal. That's the feedback loop showing you how, when you are expressing your fullness, how it's actually landing. And that feedback loop, that signal, that's what most people miss, because they're using the wrong measure entirely. So, for example, if that signal, if that feedback is subtle or quiet, or it's not like immediate, they ignore it. And then they become louder, or they dominate, or they think they have to become more obvious, instead of actually refining what's already working. So Ryan Gosling did not ignore that, right? He recognizes what's resonating, even if it's subtle, and he stays in relationship with it, and he builds on it. And that's why his career doesn't feel repetitive, right? It's so varied and colorful and diverse, but there's something very consistent. It's always there, and it's not a particular type, right? He's not, what do they call that? Typecasting? But he himself is the instrument. So now we come back to the core idea. Your inner compass tells you what's true for you. And that's so important. That's vital. It's the first thing. Listen to that. Cultivate that. And then the world's response to you shows you how that truth actually lands and what effect it creates. And that's important information too, right? Because we're in engagement, we're in relationship with others, with the world, with our work. It's that dance. And if you ignore one or the other, you end up off, right? If you only look at yourself, you only use your internal orientation and you ignore how it's landing, that's not going to get you anywhere. And if you totally forget or ignore your internal guidance system and you only focus on how people are responding, that's not going to get you there either. So if you're too internally focused, nothing lands. And if you're too externally focused, you're not going to be authentic. But when you anchor internally, orient internally, and calibrate to how your decisions and actions and presence land in the world around you, that's integration. That's mastery. And Ryan Gosling's advantage is not that he chose one or the other. It's that he learned how to read both of them, how to integrate, how to be present and dance with those, and then build from that intersection. So here's the question I'm going to leave with you. Where in your life are you paying attention to what feels right internally, which is super important, but you're not paying attention to what's actually working as you're expressing it in the world? Or the other way around. Where are you attending to how your actions are impacting the world, but you're not orienting inside yourself? Because that gap is where most people stay stuck. It's where they feel like something's not working. And the way that you can cultivate that is to soften and dance, right? It's never just one or just the other. One moment your focus is here, then it's here, but it's a soft blend. You're moving between the two of them. You're flowing and you're integrating. So when you start to close that gap and allow your internal mastery to take shape and to move in the world, you don't have to become someone else. Actually, it's just the opposite. You become more precise and more powerful by refining who you are and by expanding what's there, expanding your presence. Okay? It's fun. And it's exciting if you decide to cultivate that mastery. All right? So if this gave you something to think about, go ahead and subscribe, because this series isn't about surface success, but it's about understanding the structures beneath that kind of success so that we can also live and thrive individually, even if we're not a movie star, right? Live our lives that fully. And once you start seeing that structure, then you stop guessing and you start recognizing those signals. And that's mastery. And it's fun. All right. Hope to see you again. Thanks for listening. Be well.